Everyone keeps saying the Cleveland Browns had a good draft. But what if I told you people are actually missing what really just happened? Because if you've been watching the reactions, it's all the same complaints. Short arms, drop issues, can't separate, the kind of surface-level critiques that sound smart but don't tell the full story. And that's where things get interesting. Because while everyone's focused on what these players lack, almost nobody is talking about what the Browns were actually trying to build. This wasn't random. This wasn't panic. And it definitely wasn't guesswork. Piece by piece, this front office, led by Andrew Berry, put together something that looks way more intentional than people realize. Not flashy, not loud, but calculated. And the more you look at it, the harder it becomes to ignore. Because this draft doesn't just fill holes. It tells a story. A story about identity, about toughness, about building a system instead of chasing hype, and more importantly, about setting up the future around a quarterback like Shedeur Sanders without saying it out loud. That's the part nobody's really talking about yet. Instead, the conversation is stuck on negatives, tiny details, easy critiques that get clicks but miss context, and honestly, that's how underrated drafts are born. Because while people are busy pointing out flaws, smart teams are building advantages. And if that's what's happening here, then this entire draft might look very different a few months from now. So before you buy into the noise, let's actually break down what the Browns did, because once you see the full picture, it might completely change how you look at this class. Right now, the loudest voices around the Cleveland Browns draft are focused on what went wrong. You've probably heard it already. Spencer Fano, arms too short, KC conception, drop concerns, Denzel Boston, can't separate. It sounds convincing at first. Quick criticisms, easy to repeat, and honestly perfect for headlines. But here, the problem, those takes only tell half the story. Because in the NFL, every prospect has flaws. There is no such thing as a perfect draft pick. The difference is whether a team understands those flaws and builds around them. And that's where Cleveland might be ahead of the conversation. Take Spencer Fano, for example. Yes, his arm length isn't ideal by traditional standards, but what gets overlooked? His movement, his footwork, his ability to operate in space, something that's becoming more valuable than raw measurements in today's game. So instead of asking, what's missing? The real question is, what does he allow you to do? Same thing with KC conception. People bring up drops, but ignore his separation quickness, his ability to create after the catch, and how dangerous he is in short yard situations. He's not just a receiver, he's a tool, the kind of player you design touches for. And then there, Denzel Boston. The can't separate label sounds bad until you realize that's not even his role. He's a contested catch specialist, a red zone target, a player built to win in tight spaces where separation doesn't matter as much. That's the difference. These picks only look questionable if you expect them to be something they're not. But when you view them through the lens of role, fit, and system, they start to make a lot more sense. And that's the shift people are beginning to notice. Because this doesn't look like a team chasing perfect prospects. It looks like a team selecting specific skill sets for specific purposes. And when that happens, the conversation changes. It's no longer about individual flaws. It's about whether the pieces actually fit together. And if they do, then all that early criticism, it won't age very well. If there's one move that quietly explains everything the Cleveland Browns are trying to do, it's the Spencer Fano pick. Because this wasn't just about grabbing an offensive lineman. This was about setting the foundation. At first, the conversation around Fano sounds familiar. People point to the arm length, they question technique, they bring up the usual checklist, but once again, that's only looking at the surface. Because what really stands out with Fano is how he moves. He's quick, he's fluid, and more importantly, he fits perfectly into a zone-blocking scheme, something that relies heavily on athleticism, not just size. In today's NFL, offensive linemen aren't just there to hold ground. They have to move, adjust, and operate in space. And that's exactly where Fano excels. In a zone scheme, linemen don't just block a man, they control an area. That means they have to reach defenders, stay in front of them, and create running lanes on the move. It's not about brute force every snap. It's about positioning, timing, and speed. And if you don't have athletic linemen, that system falls apart. So when Cleveland made this pick, it wasn't random, it was a signal. They're building an offense that flows. An offense that relies on movement, rhythm, and control. And for that to work, you need a tackle who can keep up with the play, not just react to it. That's why some inside the organization have already hinted at something big. They believe he could become a franchise left tackle. Now that's a bold statement. That's not just filling a position, that's anchoring the entire offensive line for years. And if he lives up to that expectation, it changes everything for this offense. Because great tackles don't just protect quarterbacks. They unlock offenses. They give quarterbacks time. They open up the run game. They stabilize everything around them. And for a team that's clearly investing in its offense, that kind of stability is priceless. So while others are focused on what Fano is, the Browns seem focused on what he can be. And if they're right about him, then this pick won't just look good. It'll look like the moment everything started to come together. If Spencer Fano was about building the foundation, this next pick was about adding energy. Because when the Cleveland Browns brought in KC Conception, they didn't just draft a receiver, they added a problem for defenses. And yet, somehow, he's still one of the most overlooked players in this class. You'll hear the criticism: inconsistent hands, not elite top-end speed, the usual labels that tend to follow players who don't fit a perfect mold. But once again, that only scratches the surface. Because what KC actually brings is something much harder to find. Separation in tight spaces. He's quick off the line, sharp in his breaks, and when the ball is in his hands, he doesn't waste movement. He turns small openings into real gains. That kind of skill set is exactly what offenses rely on when things break down, especially for a young quarterback. And that's where the fit starts to stand out. Players like KC aren't just receivers, they're safety valves, the kind of targets you can trust on quick throws. Short routes and high-pressure downs. When protection isn't perfect or the play needs to happen fast, this is the type of weapon that keeps drives alive. But there's another layer to him that goes beyond football. KC Conception isn't just playing for stats, he's playing with purpose. He's been open about dealing with a speech impediment, something that would make most people shy away from the spotlight. Instead, he's done the opposite. He's leaned into it, spoken publicly, represented something bigger than himself. And that matters. Because teams don't just draft talent, they draft mentality, they draft resilience, they draft players who can handle pressure, adapt, and keep going when things get uncomfortable. KC fits that mold. And when you combine that mindset with his on-field versatility, it creates a player who can impact more than just the stat sheet. Screens, short routes, motion plays. He gives the offense flexibility without needing to completely change the system. Now step back and look at the bigger picture. You've got protection being built up front, and now you've got a receiver who thrives in quick, efficient situations. That combination isn't random, it complements each other. Which brings everything back into focus. Because when you build an offense like this, you're not just adding talent. You're creating options. And KC Conception, he might end up being one of the most important ones. If KC Conception brings quickness and versatility, then Denzel Boston brings something completely different. And honestly, that's exactly why this pick matters. Because when the Cleveland Browns added Boston, they weren't looking for another route technician or speed threat. They were adding a problem, specifically in the one area of the field where games are decided. The red zone. Now this is where the criticism gets loud again. Can't separate, not explosive enough. But here's the thing, separation isn't everything. Especially not inside the 20-yard line. Down there the field shrinks, space disappears, windows get tighter, and suddenly it's not about creating distance, it's about winning physically. That's where Boston thrives. At 6'4", with strong hands and elite ball tracking ability, he doesn't need a step of separation. Throw it up, let him go get it, that's his game. Contested catches, tight coverage, defenders draped all over him, it doesn't matter. He turns those situations into advantages. And that's a skill you can't teach easily. Because while speed can stretch a defense, size and control can break one, especially when the defense knows exactly where the ball is going and still can't stop it. That's what makes Boston dangerous. He gives the offense a reliable option when everything tightens up. Third down, goal line, end of a drive. Situations where execution matters more than creativity. And if you think about it, that's been a missing piece. Too many drives stall in the red zone across the league, not because teams can't move the ball, but because they don't have a target who can win those contested moments. Boston changes that. Now, does he have limitations? Of course. Every player does. But just like the other picks, the key isn't what he lacks, it's how he's used. Because when you put him in the right role, in the right situations, with the right quarterback, his strengths become amplified. And speaking of quarterbacks, a player like Shedeur Sanders, known for his accuracy and touch, fits perfectly with a receiver like this. Someone who can place the ball exactly where it needs to be and trust his guy to finish the play. That combination, that's where things get dangerous. So while some people see limitations, the Browns might be seeing something else entirely. A red zone weapon that doesn't need to be perfect, just needs to be unstoppable when it matters most. While most of the attention is on the offense, this draft didn't ignore the other side of the ball. And that's where things get even more interesting. Because when the Cleveland Browns added Emmanuel McNeil-Warren, it wasn't just about adding depth, it was about reinforcing identity. This is a different type of player. He's not flashy, he's not the guy making highlight reels every week, but what he brings is something teams quietly value more than anything: physicality and presence. At 6'3", long, aggressive, and built to play downhill, McNeil-Warren thrives closer to the line of scrimmage. He's the kind of safety who isn't afraid of contact, the kind who shows up in run support, closes gaps fast, and makes receivers think twice before coming across the middle. That alone adds a different layer to an already strong defense. But what really stands out isn't just how he plays. It's who he is. There's been a lot of talk about his journey, how he stayed loyal to Toledo despite opportunities to leave. In today's game, where transfers happen constantly and players chase bigger programs, that kind of decision is rare. And that matters. Because teams don't just build rosters, they build culture. They look for players who commit, players who stay grounded, players who don't fold when better options show up. And when you bring in someone like that, it affects more than just one position group. It sets a tone. It tells the locker room what's valued. It tells younger players what it means to buy in. And over time, those types of additions can shape how a team carries itself on and off the field. Now, from a football perspective, there are still areas to refine. Coverage against faster receivers could be a challenge, and his role may need to be managed within the scheme. But again, that's not a flaw, that's a detail. Because when you place him in the right situations, his strengths stand out immediately. Short yardage, red zone, physical matchups, that's where he can impact games. And when you combine that with everything else the Browns added in this draft, you start to see the bigger picture. This isn't just about offense. This isn't just about defense. It's about building a team that knows exactly what it wants to be. And players like McNeil Warren, they're the ones who help define that. At this point, the picks start to connect in a way that's hard to ignore. Because when you zoom out and look at what the Cleveland Browns actually did, it doesn't look like they were just drafting players. It looks like they were building an identity. Think about it. An athletic offensive tackle who fits a movement-based system, a versatile receiver who thrives in quick, high-pressure situations, a big-bodied target built for physical, contested moments, a defensive enforcer who brings toughness and discipline. These aren't random traits. They repeat. They stack. And when traits repeat across multiple picks, that usually means one thing: there's a specific vision behind it. This isn't about chasing the best player available in a vacuum. This is about fit. System fit, culture fit, mentality fit. And that's where the conversation shifts completely. Because some believe the Browns are quietly moving away from the old way of building, where you collect talent and hope it works, and towards something more controlled, more intentional, a system where every piece has a purpose. Reports suggest this front office placed heavy emphasis on qualities like toughness, consistency, and adaptability during evaluations. Not just how fast someone runs, but how they respond when things get difficult. Not just highlight plays, but repeatable production. That tells you what they care about. And it also hints at something bigger. Because when a team builds like this, it's usually not just about the roster, it's about supporting a direction. And that direction keeps circling back to Shedeur Sanders. Now, to be clear, nothing has been officially declared. But when you see protection being prioritized, quick separation weapons being added, and role-specific targets being developed, it starts to feel like an environment being shaped for a quarterback to succeed. Not survive. Succeed. And that's a key difference. Some teams throw young quarterbacks into chaos and hope they figure it out. Others build the structure first, then evaluate. Cleveland looks like it's choosing the second path. But here, where it gets interesting. If this is the plan, then expectations are about to change. Because once you build the system, once you add the pieces, once everything is aligned, there's nowhere left to hide. Now it becomes about execution. And whether this strategy is as smart as it looks right now, or if it's about to be tested in ways nobody can fully predict yet. When you really step back and look at this entire draft, the Cleveland Browns didn't just add players. They built a direction. And that's something this franchise hasn't always had. Because for years, the conversation around Cleveland has been the same: talent here, gaps there, flashes of potential, but no clear identity tying it all together. This time, it feels different. This time, it feels connected. You've got protection being addressed up front. You've got versatile weapons who can create easy opportunities. You've got physical targets who can win when space disappears. And you've got defenders who bring toughness and set the tone. Every piece serves a purpose. Every pick fits a role. And when that happens, it usually means one thing: this wasn't accidental. Now, does that guarantee success? Not even close. Because everything we're talking about right now, it all looks good on paper. It all sounds good in April. But the real test doesn't come until the season starts, when defenses adjust, when pressure builds, and when every decision gets magnified. That's when we find out what this really is. Because if these pieces come together the way the Browns expect, this draft could end up being one of those turning points people look back on. The moment where things finally started to make sense. The moment where structure replaced chaos. And if that happens, then a lot of the early criticism, the arm-length talk, the drop concerns, the separation debates, those conversations are going to fade fast. But there's another side to this. If the fit isn't as clean as it looks, if the system doesn't click right away, if roles start overlapping instead of complementing each other, then those same concerns will come right back, louder than before. And that's what makes this so interesting. Because this isn't just a draft being judged on talent. It's a draft being judged on vision. And at the center of that vision sits Shedeur Sanders. Whether he's officially named the guy or not, everything points toward him being the key to how this plays out. The structure is there, the support is there, the opportunity is there. Now it's about what happens next. So the real question is whether the Browns had a good draft. It's whether they just built something sustainable, or something that only looks good until the games begin.